Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, November 3rd, 2023. Time for another show. It really kind of snuck up on me today. 9 o'clock, more or less, comes at the same time every day. This despite the fact that it is the reversion to standard time, which isn't even standard anymore. Coming up this weekend, it happens on Sunday. It won't affect your listening to this show, I don't think. Unless you're the kind of person who, I always wished, why can't we turn the clocks back on Sunday heading into Monday, so that if you're going to feel like there's an extra hour, which doesn't really. I mean, it hasn't for a long time. Probably the last time I really cared about daylight savings time switching back to standard time was like going to Sunday school or something like that as a kid and say, oh, well, at least that, I got an extra hour, even though I was already awake anyway. My alarm hadn't gone off because I set the clocks back, but enjoying the extra hour. But on Monday, I would rather have it then. But anyway, it doesn't feel like anything now. And as it turns out, I think we're 8 months on daylight savings time now. And that doesn't leave a whole lot of months left. 4, I guess, for so-called standard time. If we're on daylight savings time even more than we are on standard time, then isn't that the standard? Yes. I think so. Anyway, so whatever. We saved that hour, and that's kind of a nice thing. But then, of course, it's dark at 2 in the afternoon or whatever, and everybody gets depressed about that. So instead, we won't do it. I refuse. I don't know, something like that. But that's coming up. Be aware of that, so that you don't miss the start of the show on Monday. All right. Can somebody signal to my laptop that I don't care if there's a software update for Epson right now? Okay, put that aside. All right, time to turn our attention to the things occupying, probably more space in your head than daylight savings time and what a annoyance it is to switch back and forth. And, Justice has hinted at a couple of them in his signals to me that everything seems to be working just fine. Tommy Tuberville, much on his mind. And astonishing story now that they are beginning to bypass his holds one at a time, which, of course, I guess he just never expected that they would try and do that, because he used to hint that, I'm holding it up because I don't want them all to go through at once, but if you want to bypass me, you'll have to do it one at a time, but that, I guess, would be okay. I can't stop you from doing that. And then when they finally said, all right, well, in that case, we've actually finally had enough, there was that possibly triggering event of the commandant of the Marine Corps having a heart attack, stressing out, doing two people's top-level brass jobs, 18-hour days at, he's in his 50s. And, those Marines stay in good shape and everything, but, I mean, stress is stress. And it gets to you eventually. And, so that apparently motivated his fellow Republicans to tell him he was being a jerk. But then, anyway, when push came to shove and they did, in fact, start to move these nominations, these promotions, one at a time, he insisted that also was unfair and terrible and mean to him. And, he just really doesn't seem to grasp this whole Senate thing where he's supposed to be legislating or other people have opinions about things and he's not the coach and doesn't get to say the way it's going to go. So it's been kind of odd. Anyway, yes, much happening on Capitol Hill, things we can catch up on, stories that have fallen by the wayside. Let's just get right to it and run through them and try and empty out as much of this pocket stuff as possible. There is a lot going on. Let's see. Back to the topic of the week, I guess, which really has been the whole time Mike Johnson and his weirdo, worldview, essentially. And one of the original chroniclers of Mike Johnson, the movement the circles he moves in, and I guess the movement he moves in, and that sounds kind of weird, it has been Sarah Posner. And she's writing now. I don't know. Is she normally had this gig, or did MSNBC bring her in because of her expertise, or was she already there? I don't know. But at any rate, she's writing this article at MSNBC. Mike Johnson and his allies tried to defend his extremist views. It didn't go well. This is actually more of interest to us, I think, because of the tactic they're trying to use here. It would be wise for us to allow Sarah to explain it to us so that when we see it in action, we recognize it and can counteract it as effectively as possible, if we can figure out a way of doing that. But Sarah writes it up this way. The sudden elevation of Representative Mike Johnson to House Speaker pushed his records vetting to after his election. That must have been kind of a bitter pill for Sarah to swallow. I mean, she's trying to speak now to a new audience that doesn't know about her long history of covering this movement and Mike Johnson in particular. And she spent the first week of the whole thing saying, hey, hello, you want to know about Mike Johnson? I've written a lot about him. You can use this Google machine. You can look things up. You'll find, although it is kind of tough to Google Mike Johnson. You know, is like, that'll be a lot of hits. There's going to be a lot of Michael Johnsons out there. And, well, anyway, but she spent the first week saying, and I've been covering this guy forever. I know all about him. Why aren't you all coming to me? And that's just not really usually the way the internet actually works. But networks do work that way. Once you get in the Rolodex of the producer who knows that you're an expert in this thing. And I'm hopeful that if she wasn't already on board at MSNBC, that it happened that way and they brought her in. She's now, it looks to me like switching tactics in a way, which is interesting because this is about a switch in tactics for Mike Johnson. And saying, all right, let's just admit that most of America didn't pay attention to what I was telling them before. But I did amass this vast knowledge about him. I will now share it with you as if it's the first time ever. And I'll even give you the excuse of being late to the party because, gosh, it was all just so sudden, right? The sudden elevation of Johnson to House Speaker pushed his vetting to after his election. Not really. I already vetted him. You just didn't read it. Okay, so credit there to Sarah, and she's treating us all gently here. So anyway, it was only once he became second in line to the presidency that most people learned Johnson played a key role in the House's effort to overturn the 2020 election. We learned that. We read Sarah talking about it. But anyway, there's also the fact that he is virulently anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ, and has promoted teaching the Bible as a history book in public schools. That last one, I think we probably could have guessed. The other two, I guess, we would have guessed those as well, just by the fact that he was a Republican and well regarded in their ranks. Okay, well, that means he's going to be virulently anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ. But not all of them necessarily actually will stand firm behind promoting teaching the Bible as a history book in public schools. So anyway, now Johnson and his allies are hitting back against his critics. Remarkably, their response to the exposure of Johnson's turbocharged theopolitics is not to argue that media reports exaggerate or misapprehend his record as a lawyer or a legislator or his intentions as a speaker. Instead, Johnson's closest allies are amplifying his extreme views and recasting them as mainstream, quote, truths that are beyond challenge. So don't try, I guess, is the message they would like you to absorb. This week, Johnson gave an interview to the Daily Signal. I've always wondered about exactly who that was they were trying to push their storylines. The Daily Signal is the news site of the Heritage Foundation. You know all about the Heritage Foundation, but if you're reading this story and you don't know, they helpfully tell you that is an agenda-setting hub for the right, and particularly the religious right. I think that's largely true. Johnson was able to, quote, open up as the Daily Signal's Mary Margaret Olohan. Or Olohan? I don't know how she's pronounced it. O-L-O-H-A-N. Olohan. Anyway, this is the way she put it, that he was able to open up about how his Christian faith, quote, informs his politics. Okay. Now, while he's hardly been tight-lipped about that topic, this fresh clarification of his central political philosophy makes his rapid, uninterrogated ascension even more worrisome. It's a central premise of the Bible, he says, that God invented civil government, Johnson told Holohan. That's an interesting way of putting it, to say the least. Who added that, like many Americans of faith, Holohan says, Johnson sees government as a, quote, design of God and a gift to mankind in a fallen society. Which is interesting because most of us, I think of the civil government situation as that's the society that we live in. Is it fallen? What a gift from God then. He's given us a piece of crap civil society. I don't understand that. But he views it differently somehow, and I guess we'll get an explanation of that now. If those jarring statements do not comport with your own understanding of the Bible, or of the constitutional separation of church and state, well, you are not alone. The Washington Stand, that's the news site of the Family Research Council, and I'll invoke God and say, thank God I've never actually heard of the Washington Stand. They never reached my desk. The Daily Signal leaks through occasionally, but thankfully the Washington Stand does not. But they come from the Family Research Council. That's Tony Perkins' operation. You heard his name yesterday. We were reminded of his existence. He sort of faded from the picture, but he's very closely tied to Mike Johnson as well, a longtime friend of the new speaker. And Perkins similarly assailed Johnson's critics in an article entitled Johnson Critics are a bunch of a-holes. That would be a good title for it, but it's Johnson Critics Mistake Christianity, American Principles for Theocracy. That's the ploy here. Every time that you, Johnson critics, say he's a theocrat or he wants to impose a Christian theocracy in this country, no, you misunderstand. That's just common sense, good old-fashioned American Christian values shining through, and you don't like it. How so? Well, let's see. The Stand's, Washington Stand's, senior writer, Joshua Arnold, turned to the director of the Family Research Council's own Center for Biblical Worldview. It is what it says, the Center for a Biblical Worldview. I didn't realize you had to have a whole center in there, or the Family Research Council isn't a descriptive enough umbrella. So, I don't know. They need to give a guy a title. He's the director of this center. David Clausen. And it says parenthetically here that the Center for Biblical Worldview, according to its website, says that a person exhibits a biblical worldview when their beliefs and actions are aligned with the Bible, according to us, acknowledging its truth and applicability to every area of life. And like I said, it's not beyond them to say, well, I mean, the question of whether or not you're aligned with the Bible will be settled by us. We'll tell you whether you're aligned with the Bible or not you. We get to certify whether you do or don't have a biblical worldview. Anyway, Clausen defended Johnson's beliefs as, quote, just basic Christian belief coming right out of the Bible. Well, that basic Christian belief, argued Clausen, includes the belief, I guess, that God is the one that ordains authority. That's common in Western culture, if not a little bit outdated, but okay. God is the one that gives delegated authority to human beings to wield it on his behalf. And I guess that explains how all the Republicans say things like, well, God called me to this, or God decided I should be, God ordained me to be Speaker of the House, God ordained me to be state legislature for the 89th District of Oklahoma, whatever it is, right? Clausen went on to suggest that Johnson's critics are biblical illiterates who lack any understanding of Christianity. He describes them as folks, just folks, but they're folks who don't have any reference to what the Bible teaches. They're trying to scare millions of Americans when so many of us would just be saying amen, which is, I think, mispronounced. It should be amen, really, but Christian Americans prefer that Americanized amen version instead. Anyway, if anything, has come into sharper focus over the past week or so, it's that Johnson has spent his legal and political career immersed in an insular world where everyone around him believes there are certain, quote, truths like regressive gender roles or creationism, or that the separation of church and state is a myth, even though it was kind of clearly stated in the writings at the time. Or, as Johnson stated this week, without equivocation, God invented civil government. There it is again. While these views are commonplace on the Christian right, they are far from commonplace among Christians more broadly. Most Christians wouldn't say that there is a central premise, that this is a rather central premise of the Bible, but Johnson's focus on authority, because he's got some, as well as the way he distinguishes civil government from other forms of government, tracks with the language of Christian Reconstructionism. Julie Ingersoll, a religious studies professor at the University of North Florida and an author of Building God's Kingdom Inside the World of Christian Reconstruction, told me. Well, it's not surprising, of course, that the author of the Christian Reconstruction book says, well, you know what this is? This is Christian Reconstructionism. Okay, well, it is, as it turns out. As Ingersoll's work has illuminated, Reconstructionism, a movement developed in the 1970s, teaches that God ordained separate spheres of governmental authority. The family, which most people don't really think of as governmental, but I guess fundamentalist Christians probably do. Dad's the ruler, and that's all there is to it. Which reminds me, actually, as I was thinking about the story yesterday about how he has no bank account, what's a fundamentalist Christian head of household doing without a bank account? It seems to me like an abdication of responsibility, and the idea that anybody else in their household would control their finances seems ludicrous. But okay. Anyway, so Reconstructionism, right. There are three separate spheres of governmental authority. The family, the church, which, you know, in the olden days, back in the old country in Europe, we understood that there was a long period of time during which there was this conflation of the church and government, that the church did govern things and had a hand in government. Then we had an enlightenment, and we decided that was a bad idea. But Mike Johnson thinks that the enlightenment was the bad idea, and we should go back to having the church run government. But there you go. And then the third sphere is this other thing that God invented to give us a hobby, I guess, civil government. In the Reconstructionist view, civil government should not do anything that interferes with families or churches, or more specifically, conservative Christian families. Everybody else's family you can interfere with. Or what they consider to be their inviolable right to impose their religious beliefs in the public square. So family and church should be governing us first, and civil government can take care of other things just so long as it doesn't get in the way of whatever whims, I guess, family rulers and church rulers decide they are for. What do they support and oppose? So I guess parking laws, unless, of course, it means that this very strong Christian family can't park their car here, in which case, to hell with your interference, I guess. Anyway, there is virtually no one in today's religious right who would claim the label, actually, of Christian Reconstructionist, largely because they do not want to be tied to the positions of its founder, R.J. Rushdoony, I'm guessing is how you would say this, who cited supposed biblical law, quote-unquote biblical law, to support things like slavery and the death penalty for homosexuality. But the broad contours of Rushdoony's framework, as Ingersoll has documented, has left an indelible mark on the modern religious right. The insistence that a biblical worldview should bear on every government decision shapes right-wing Christians' positions on a range of issues. Their objections to abortion and marriage equality, for example, is based on their claim that civil government lacks the God-ordained authority to create laws that they say conflict with the Bible. They also consider public education to be an improper, unbiblical exercise of government authority. You can't educate children. That belongs to the families and churches. A usurpation is what they think this is. Because of that, they have undermined public schools at every turn, I would say, created their own Christian schools, and advocated for and shaped the Christian homeschooling movement. I think that helps put that in a lot of context. Anyway, we'll wrap it up here. This is the end. These kinds of crude dismissals of Johnson's critics serve two purposes. They reassure the GOP base that their biblical worldview is the only correct way to view both the Bible and the government. Two birds, one stone. And that any critiques of it evince a lack of understanding of just basic Christian tenets, as Clausen puts it. Secondly, and more crucially, they aim to bully reporters and political opponents into retreating from examining Johnson's record and drawing attention to the ways that it threatens pluralism, democracy, and the rights of others. By repeating the lie that Johnson's beliefs are basic Christianity and accusing anyone who fails to understand that of ignorance, the Christian right and the Republican Party it controls want scrutiny of Johnson to evaporate. We can only hope that their efforts will backfire as millions of Americans wake up to what it really means to have a top government official proudly tout his supposedly biblical worldview. I think, though, the American public is largely in wait-and-see mode, because it isn't the first time, I would say, that we've been confronted with that possibility. But I think conditions are slightly different these days, and it may be, and it may end up being the first time that we actually see this really threatened to be implemented as civil law. And, well, yeah, I think there will be a backlash against it, and rightly so. But I think most people are just sort of like, well, I don't know. The stores are still open, and the TV is still on. I can still get ice cream and bagels and such. So I don't know that I really feel like we're living in a theocracy yet. But I think in short order, We'll see whether he's able to make this work. I mean, it may be that not enough of the Republican conference in the House is of like mind just yet, but, and we'll see whether he survives long enough to try to amass an army of his own as Speaker and reshape the House in his own image, let's say, borrowing from the biblical worldview. All right. Well, anyway, let's see. Another thing that I mentioned earlier in the week, and we didn't get to finish up reading about, but is more about the weirdness of the Johnson family. I had the Business Insider article about Kelly Johnson's strange counseling service, and it's been a couple of days since I read the beginning, so the temptation to jump down to where I stopped, maybe we need a refresher, and we'll run through it as quickly as possible, see what we can get done before the break. I'm sure we'll have to carry it over. Kelly Johnson, that's his wife, practices a form of Christian counseling, remember this, that classifies people into choleric, phlegmatic, and other ancient personality types, purportedly ordained by God. There's an awful lot ordained by God in their view. And Kelly's practice of counseling, I guess, was ordained by God too, but also by somebody else later on, again in the 1970s and 80s, who said, it's been going this way for about 2,000 years, but I have another addition to make. And everybody just look away, and then when I'm done, I'll write it down, and then I'll read it to you. It's like Mormonism. It's all in this hat. I got to look in here, and I'll tell you, there's a new commandment from God, and I'll be darned if he doesn't put the power to interpret it in my hands. And guess what? We're all going to do this thing. So, okay, here's how it's put. Kelly Johnson, she is who she is, wife of the newly elected House Speaker, ran a Christian counseling service, and a couple other things, that is affiliated with an organization that advocates against, no surprise, abortion and homosexuality, and whose practices are built on the teachings of the Greek physician Hippocrates. By the way, extremely low abortion rate among homosexuals. Just saying. These are two things you really, really dislike, and it's odd, but one is actually taking care of the other, as it turns out. Now, of course, it's not entirely true, but it's much lower, I would guess, than among the general population, because, Well, all right. Well, we don't want to get into discussions of biology here. Besides which, anyway, we'll leave that aside. And this is not, anyway, logic wouldn't convince her anyhow, obviously. It's not clear if Kelly Johnson will continue her practice, although it looks like it because she's closing down the website, etc. Not long after Mike Johnson became House Speaker, her website became inaccessible. That's actually a pretty good indication of whether she'll publicly continue her practice. Johnson, her husband of more than 24 years, rose overnight from a virtually obscure House lawmaker to the position that is second in line to the presidency. The couple is deeply religious. Both of them previously worked with religious organizations and causes that the religious right advocates for. Along with her counseling, Johnson's also listed as an advisor to Louisiana Right for Life. Right for Life? Really? Not Right to Life? Okay. An anti-abortion organization. Kelly Johnson's website listed a specialty in temperament counseling, a specialty that she received training for. I probably would guess, quote unquote, training for, from an organization founded in the 1980s by a Christian couple. According to the materials the organization provides, the National Christian Counselors Association is adamant that its offerings take place outside of more traditional state-licensed settings, so that counselors and clients can be fully engaged through their faith, to the extent that the state won't license you if you just say, well, God just declares you healed and declares that also you owe me $50,000 is, I guess, not enough. And not enforceable, perhaps, in a court of law. I don't know. Anyway, very interesting. A little bit, reminds me a little bit of like Rand Paul, who doesn't necessarily put an overtly Christian spin on it. In fact, he was a bit of a weirdo pagan type guy at some point. Not literally, but joking around. Anyway, but inventing his own licensure anyhow. So, reminds me a little bit of that. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Shall we jump right back in to this Business Insider piece about Kelly Johnson and her odd counseling? We got about to where we did the first time we read this thing, and now we're ready to sort of move on here. So, okay, they're not too much into state licensure. That's not surprising. The state-licensed professional counselor in certain states is forbidden to pray, read, or refer to the Holy Scriptures, or counsel against such things as homosexuality, abortion, etc. A catalog of the organization's offerings states. That may or may not be true, but it's meant to scare you into saying, well, I can't go the state licensure route. I should be going this route because I definitely want to pray, read, or refer to the Holy Scriptures, counsel against such things as homosexuality, abortion, etc. I want to do those things. Got to go this way. So, initiating such counsel could be considered unethical by the state. And I'm sure that in some states, that's probably, you would run afoul of certain laws and regulations in doing some things that could broadly be defined as something as open-ended as, well, you're forbidden to pray. Well, I don't think that that's really the case, but you're probably forbidden from saying, well, prayer is going to be the counseling for which I charge you all this money, or something like that. But, or you know how it is. You run into the Christian right people and say, oh yeah, all I wanted to do was pray, and they said I couldn't, and prayer is forbidden. Well, it was the middle of someone else's appendectomy. You can't just kick the doors in and say, I want to pray in here. And then they throw you out because you're non-sterile and you're not a surgeon and you have no business being in there. Oh, you're anti-prayer. I'm anti, septic toxmosis. I don't know, whatever. But get the hell out of here. You have no business being here. Or this is a Wendy's, right? I want all the cooking to stop and we're all going to pray for food instead. And pray to find out what is in these Frosties. I would like to know, and no one will tell me. God will tell me. Well, no, get out of here. This is a Wendy's. You're anti-prayer. Anyway, neither here nor there. The temperament-based approach breaks people down into 5 types, which, as I mentioned last time we read this, is odd because this is all supposedly it's reasonable because it's an ancient practice. Hippocrates did it. Well, they did a lot of things, not all of which made any real sense. But when they did it, there were 4 types, but they invented a 5th one for trademark purposes, I suppose. This is, there's no trademark on Hippocrates' work, but if we add a 5th thing, we can copyright it and put it in a book and sell it. So who's doing this? Richard and Phyllis Arno, who established a test to identify people's temperament, founded the National Christian Counselors Association in the early 1980s. They and their advocates prefer the term temperament over personalities, as the term personality is characterized as a mask, while temperaments are inborn, and also they're against masks, and thus inherent to each individual, regardless of outside influences such as parenting. Okay, their work is largely based on Hippocrates and his view, that there were 4 temperaments. So it's largely based on the idea that there were 4 temperaments, with the exception that there aren't, and there are actually 5. But 4 of them we stole from Hippocrates. Now, there's involvement of someone else in all of this nonsense as well. Tim LaHaye, a controversial and influential figure on the evangelical right, pointed to Hippocrates' beliefs when he began his own work in the 1960s and 70s, and the Arnos cited LaHaye in one of their books. LaHaye was vehemently opposed to LGBTQ people, writing an entire book, a whole book, on why he believed gay people were depressed because homosexuality was immoral and antithetical to the Bible. It's interesting the way that is written. Is that supposed to mean that he thought they were depressed because they were defined as immoral and antithetical to the Bible, and that made them sad? Or is this some other relation between this? But I don't know. This writing and the punctuation makes it unclear. An entire book on why he believed gay people were depressed because homosexuality was immoral. I guess that's what it's supposed to mean. Anyway, according to the New York Times, no less an authority than that, LaHaye's anti-Catholic and anti-Semitic writings led him to step down from an honorary position, leading Congressman Jack Kemp's 1988 GOP primary campaign. Do you remember that one? I remember the campaign. I don't remember LaHaye. And I remember Jack Kemp as being one of those guys that was like, oh, no, he doesn't actually, he doesn't have those kinds of people backing him. But I guess he did. But then he kicked them out. So I don't know what to make of it. But okay, apparently Tim LaHaye became briefly famous for that. He also later pushed President George W. Bush's election, that makes some sense, in 2000, and worked with then Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, again, in the 2008 presidential primaries. LaHaye became enormously popular and wealthy later in his life after he penned a series of apocalyptic novels. And if I am not mistaken, are those the Left Behind novels? I think they may be. And let's see. Shall we look at that? What are we going to look at Wikipedia for that, maybe? All right, I'll click on that and say, yep, Tim LaHaye. There we are. There's another author there, Jerry Jenkins, if you believe that's a real name. But okay, so there you have it. Many of you may have heard of the Left Behind series, like sort of a whole, well, I mean, I guess I would say ordinarily sort of a science fiction, science fantasy, except one, the science is Bible. I don't know if that's right. And, of course, they would say it's not fiction. But, the whole premise of the thing was everybody else who was left behind after the rapture, I guess. So some sort of post-apocalyptic future, which is a weird premise because wouldn't you want to know all about the things that were going on in heaven? All right. Well, at any rate, apparently that's not what the books are about. So that's LaHaye for you. And later, that's a downplaying of what he's, I think, most famous for. But there you have it. Anyway, we're concentrating on an earlier part of his work. One post for an affiliated counselor on the organization's website describes a deliverance ministry in addition to temperament testing, using this approach to drive demons out of a client. Now you see why they have problems with state licensure. To drive demons out of a client. Make sure the person is better able to receive and act upon godly counsel, including recommendations from the APS profiles. What are APS profiles? They are the abbreviations for the couple's temperament testing system. So, basically, it's an interesting sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, not too surprising for, apocalyptic Christian warriors or whatever. But, our temperament counseling works wonders. It's biblically ordained. We can help you with whatever your problem is. Okay, fine. All right. I sign up. I'm paying you money. Hey, I don't really feel like we're making any progress on the problem. Well, one issue may be it's not the problem that my counseling doesn't work. What's happening here is I didn't realize this at first, but now I understand this to be the case. You have a demon in you. And we should really be applying some of our other techniques to drive demons out of you so that you're better able to receive and act upon godly counsel, including the recommendations from the APS profiles, right? So, maybe you saw The Exorcist or something, and that's your idea of how you drive demons out of you. Whatever it is. So demon out, I cast thee out so that we may better receive and act upon godly counsel, including the recommendations of the APS files. Amen. Maybe some Latin, although that's very Catholic, and this is anti-Catholic, so I don't know. Anyway, that's the idea. Pay us for the counseling, and if it's not working, it's because you have a demon in you and you need to pay us extra. That doesn't come in the package. We'll drive the demon out of you so that you're more able afterwards to listen to what we're saying the first time and continue to pay us for that. Not all Christian counseling is created the same, you should know. Some more traditional counselors may add biblical elements to science-based approaches. But remember, don't do that because the state says you can't, because they said you can't pray. So don't go down the licensure road. Come back to us if you want to do a little bit of praying. But anyway, some traditional counselors do, in fact, add biblical elements to science-based approaches, while others counseling might take the form of pastoral guidance. And some reject more science-based approaches in favor of a faith-based model that emphasizes the power of God and Scripture. And we just happen to throw in demons as well. And also ancient Greek understanding of the four humors. But okay. It's not entirely clear where Johnson falls on this informal scale because no one cares to grade her or put her anywhere. There's no categorization, no standardization because there's no license. She has a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Louisiana Tech and a master's in education from Centenary College. In a personal testimonial, Johnson wrote about deliverance through extraordinary trials, including her recovery from a broken neck in a 2007 car accident and other serious health challenges. Not sure what that has to do with elementary education or counseling, but maybe make you a motivational speaker, unfortunately, in today's world. But okay, whatever. I don't know what to say about that. Her counseling, which had a varying fee structure, was affiliated with Cypress Baptist Church in Benton, Louisiana, which, according to Louisiana Baptist Message, is where the couple attends services. Their church, in keeping with the denomination's views, proclaims it is welcoming to all, but makes it clear that it, quote, recognizes only the biblical definition of marriage, unquote, and only sex through marriage. So if you have sex outside of marriage, they won't recognize what you're doing. I can't tell what that is. How they condemn it, I don't know. But they recognize it just fine when it comes time to beat you up for it, I guess. But of course, that's not what they mean by recognize. The organization it does advise counselors. It advises counselors to follow some elements of more traditional counseling, including maintaining the confidentiality of what's discussed. That's nice. Counselors are also advised to hold malpractice insurance. They recognize they can get in trouble for that. A representative for the organization did not immediately return insiders' request for comment. The Johnsons are deeply religious and have both publicly professed their biblical worldview. We heard all about that in the first segment. The future House Speaker, and now he's the current House Speaker, rose to fame in the 1990s when he and Kelly became de facto spokespeople for covenant marriages, a special agreement offered in some states that makes it more difficult for married couples to get a divorce. Doesn't say anything about making it better to stay married. It just makes it harder to get unmarried. Johnson later cut his teeth as a litigator seeking to advance school prayer and defend bans on same-sex marriage. He also served in a leadership role with the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S. Before his rapid political rise, Johnson wrote frequent guest columns for his local newspaper, in which he questioned LGBT Americans, as CNN previously reported. At one point, he wrote in favor of criminalizing gay sex. Johnson said on Thursday night that he now views the issue of same-sex marriage as settled law after the Supreme Court's landmark Obergefell versus Hodges ruling. I don't believe him about that. He said he has nothing personally against LGBTQ people. He just questions their lifestyle choices and believes that God wants to smite them, but nothing against you. And don't believe him about settled law, because that was what they always said they thought about Roe v. Wade. And guess what? They didn't believe it was settled law, and they attacked it every chance they got until they saw it overturned, in which case it became unsettled law. And now you can do whatever the hell you want. So, I don't know. Look out for that excuse. All right. Well, there wasn't as much about the weird practice of temperament counseling as I was hoping for. And maybe we have to do our own research on that. And it might, in fact, bear fruit. But what it seems to me is they just needed a hook. They took this thing. They were able to point to it and say, no one objects to the ancient Greeks, right? What bothered me really about the headline, it wasn't so much her weird practice as that they bought it hook, line, and sinker, that like stealing from Hippocrates, that's not a Christian practice, but they just hung that term on it. Like, oh, do you think it's weird that I'm practicing this ancient Greek form of, I don't know what this even is. I mean, I guess they thought it was medicine, but they don't go into the four humors and why people are choleric and phlegmatic and various other diagnoses that they give and what they try to do. I mean, the basis of the Hippocratic practice there was, well, if you are sanguine, that's your personality type. And if you're overly sanguine, that means you're in physical imbalance, that you have too much blood in you. And the only cure for this weird personality trait that you were so, either violently angry or you had these mood swings or whatever, that was because you were sanguine and you needed to have the imbalance corrected by us poking you full of holes so that blood came out of you, so that there was less blood in you. That's called stabbing you. I mean, they called it bleeding you. And, this lasted into almost into modernity in Europe, and I guess in the American colonies too, with bleeding and leaching. And I don't know how they got yellow or black bile out of you when they thought you had an imbalance of that. I don't want to know. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe there's really no application of that in the counseling. But I guess if they're counseling you that you're possessed by demons and you need to have an exorcism, and and if they're also stabbing you, this is a bad counselor. So it's true. I'd agree with their encouragement of their practitioners to hold malpractice insurance. But anyway, there's more weirdness to be discovered there. But I guess she's going to give up the practice now because that's the Christian wifely thing to do. All right. Well, let's put that aside. There's a lot more that we need to cover. In actual sort of breaking news type things, I don't know if I want to spend that much time on it. I want to acknowledge that Sam Bankman-Fried has been found guilty on all counts in that weird crypto trial, and that's good. Generally speaking, I didn't really follow that closely, but I did see something yesterday that made me think, and I had seen this on Blue Sky, Matt Binder, I guess, saying that, bringing this up, saying there was a significant number of people on social media who were absolutely convinced, for no reason, that Sam Bankman-Fried was going to completely get away with it. I mean, it's not that there was no reason. He was politically connected. There was billions of dollars at stake. His family was relatively prominent, and he was pulling the very, increasingly common, adopting the stance of, I don't know anything about finance, and I don't know anything about people, and I don't know how to do anything, but all of that is just quirkiness that's a testament to my genius somehow. And people swallowed this. It's weird. He just sits there in the middle of meetings and plays video games. But that's because he's so bored with our pedestrian struggles to understand complex financial transactions and cryptocurrency. And he gets it so naturally. He's just basically mocking us for not understanding. This clearly calls for us tripling our investment with him. Anyway, as it turns out, all the people who thought that he was going to skate on it are, I guess, wrong, because he's convicted on 7 counts. I guess there's room for an appeal, but I don't know how far it'll go. But in this day and age, that's what billionaires do. They lose. They just say, I'm going to appeal, whether they have a real shot at it or not. And he has a screenshot of an exchange, I guess, between Tom Fitton, the weirdo from Judicial Watch, being answered by the other weirdo from X, Elon Musk. So Fitton's view of things is, while the Biden gang has been harassing and threatening Elon Musk, that's how he engaged him, they mentioned him, and his companies, one of the worst scams in modern finance was being perpetuated under their noses by a regular White House and Hill visitor and second biggest Democratic donor, meaning, I guess, Sam Bankman-Fried. And Elon Musk, because he saw his name in it, chimes in, SBF was a major Dem donor, so no investigation. That was his opinion of what was going to happen back in November of last year. But a year later, he's convicted on all 7 counts. So, so much for the genius of Elon Musk or the judicial watching of Tom Fitton. Just thought I'd throw that out there for your entertainment today. All right, let's see. And we're going to go back into pocket. There's so many things hanging around that I thought I would share with you. Let's see. Well, let's see. We should do more from the Trump trials. His kids are having to testify. I've noticed that in the New York case. And I guess it's worth noting there was a bit of a meltdown by the lawyers in the New York case as well. And they seem to be now realizing that they're going to lose this case, and thinking that maybe their best strategy is to antagonize the judge, which is ordinarily the worst strategy. But I guess if you're going to lose the case, it can't get much, much worse, right? Like, he can't say, you lost the case and I hate you, so we're executing you and your lawyers. Like, that's not going to happen. The judge does not have that latitude, unless you take a biblical worldview. Well, anyway, let's not go there. But essentially, it's beginning to sound like the play is, if we antagonize the judge, he'll blow up and make a mistake, and we'll have grounds for a mistrial or an appeal. So let's try that. We're told that Chris Kise is among the best of Trump's lawyers, the most, serious and accomplished. And now he's the one having to execute this strategy, which is amazing because, we told him everything that Trump touches dies. You're going to end up having to look like a bad lawyer in order to give your client the best shot at getting away with his wrongdoing. So that's got to be a bit of a downer if you're one of the few good lawyers around. It's described this way. Oh, and I wanted to mention, yes. Oh, right. The kids are testifying in this one. Ivanka is supposed to come up pretty soon. She moved for a stay or of some kind that would block her from having to appear. The motion was denied. She'll have to go. Don Jr. was on the stand the other day. I think Eric, I don't know whether he's on the stand yet or is coming up in the next couple of days. Then Ivanka. But Don Jr. doing a Don Jr. thing. I didn't actually put this aside, but I can find it from my social media feed. But I guess, I don't know why he was doing it, but I guess he was trying to, at some point, offer some defense of his father as a good person, good parent, not the type of person who would be mixed up in all this wrongdoing or whatever. And I don't know what occasioned him to say, to reference, charges of racism being leveled against him. That's not really at issue in the case, I don't think. But at any rate, he offered up this, this kind of defense here where he said, who checked this out? Was, Seth Maskett, actually, on Blue Sky, saying this has to be one of the best not a racist bone in his body defenses. My dad can't be racist because he left me in the care of Michael Jackson, which actually, makes me think less about race and more about other problems. But this, according to a Bloomberg report on happenings at the trial that he grabs a screenshot of. It says here, the younger Trump defends his father throughout the book. Oh, okay. I thought this would be at the trial. What a bad timing. But anyway, so I guess he's got a book. I didn't even realize he had a book. What is this Bloomberg article? I'm learning the news right along with you. That's one of the most exciting things about this show. I don't know what I'm doing at the time. What is this book? So this is Bloomberg's, is it current? Yes. Coverage. No, it isn't. It's an old coverage from 2019. Wow. Okay. But November 2nd, 2019. So you had me fooled there. Donald Trump Jr. has a few grievances to air in an upcoming book. Well, I guess it upcame already. And the passage is, the younger Trump defends his father throughout the book, including pushing back a number of times on charges that the president is a racist. He said when he was a kid, Michael Jackson lived in Trump Tower and came over to play video games with him and Eric. And then, quote, oh, and by the way, given all the things my father has been called, particularly a racist, it sure sounds odd that he'd let his son vacation with a black man. What? Or hang out with Michael Jackson, doesn't it? If he's a racist, he's sure not very good at it. And I was thinking, maybe not the stunk you think it is there, Don Jr. My dad can't be racist. He may not be, I don't know, he may be racist anyway. But one, it's no particular proof. But two, also, my dad is a good dad. He left me alone with Michael Jackson. Oh. And, in combination with the fact that he also gave Ivanka away to John Casablancas and Elite Modeling, wow. I don't know. Just seems like maybe you should seek some counseling at some point and talk about what might have happened way back when. I don't know. I don't know if anything happened. It's just, but if you're looking for my dad's a great dad, he gave my sister to John Casablancas and let me go on vacation with Michael Jackson. I don't think it was a big actual, like a big win, on that one. Okay. But anyway, now is not a great time to bring those things up either in the middle of the trial for his dad, or in the middle of several trials, some of which are in fact criminal trials that he may also have been guilty of, like the highest level of celebrity child abuse. But okay. Anyway, yes. So up in New York, as I said, things are going off the rails, and it seems like it might be part of a strategy. We'll begin this one, although we'll run right straight into the next break. But I'll give you an idea of what's going on. Rolling Stone, Adam Ronsley and Aswin Subsang are allowing me to mangle their names, and writing for Rolling Stone, Team Trump is using Fire Festival strategies in a New York fraud case. That's an interesting label for it. We'll see if it works and if it sticks. There's no chance of actually winning on the merits in this case, so Trump and his lawyers are hoping to score some PR points, kick up as much dirt as possible, enrage the judge, trash some of the witnesses, and turn the process into a media circus. Sounds like a good plan. And yet it's not, as it turns out. But anyway, that's just the subheader for this piece, which is actually almost going on a month old now. But I mean, things really escalated in the last day or so. I'll use what time there is left before we have to exit for the break to say that yesterday's shenanigans, I guess, was more of the same, and that Chris Kise is fighting with the judge about the role of the judge's clerk in the proceedings, and is like actually objecting to this idea that I see this person is passing you notes in the middle of the trial and in the middle of our discussions. What's this interference? But it's the clerk, and like that's fairly common practice. And the judge is like, listen, I have an absolute right. There's not only it's so not wrong that it sounds extremely dumb for, like, have you ever been in a courtroom trial at all? Are you sure you're a lawyer objecting so vehemently to my clerk passing me notes during the course of the trial? You know what I should do is I should grab a report of what is happening, what happened yesterday, and bring you up to speed. Oops, and then I got to play our music and get the hell out of here. And then I can read you this slightly older piece from Rolling Stone that helps put some context to yesterday's happenings, but it's been going on for long enough that in early October they were writing this piece that, yeah, their new strategy may be to actually antagonize the judge in this trial. I've seen him antagonize judges before trials, but not during them. That's a new one. I'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's do it this way. I grabbed this piece from the Messenger because, I don't know, it came up near the tops in the search. Seemed like a good place to go. I don't know. We don't call their name all that often. So here's what's going on, or the report from yesterday's proceedings. And I think this, this makes sense, and maybe this in combination with the Rolling Stone piece will help make some sense of it as a strategy. Judge warns Trump's lawyer, this sounds bad, right, against swiping at clerk. Do not refer to my staff again. That's the headline. There's a subheader we'll get to in a second here, but there's been this continuing battle between Trump's team and the judge over the role of the clerk in all of this, which is absurd. And ordinarily, it would just never come up. It's not a thing, right? But Trump has gone to some extraordinary lengths to try to turn it into a thing. Like even part of the debate over whether or not there ought to be a gag order on him and how broad it needs to be. And this is the second of Trump's trials, I think, in which a gag order has been contemplated and where judges have said, listen, I understand as a federal judge, I'm going to be the target of a lot of ire. I'm used to that. And I won't include comments about me in the gag order, but no targeting other court employees, not my staff, not my clerks, certainly not witnesses, et cetera, et cetera. And so that it's beginning to look like a trial tactic for him. He's doing it both in the case before Judge Chutkan and also now the case before Judge Engoron here, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Anyway, like I said, it's becoming a bit of a strategy, and I guess this is what they're hoping to get out of it, to make it look like when the judge gets angry about it, either he's losing his temper, or if he says something like this, Judge Engoron suggested that comments by Trump's lawyer, Chris Kise, about the female clerk, it's a woman who's clerking at the moment for Judge Engoron, may be fueled by misogyny. And I mean, he's doing everything that he can to underline that charge. Not the judge, but Chris Kise. And Kise is battling with him over things and saying, and antagonizing him by saying, you know, the clerk she's so stupid, she's an idiot. What are you talking about? She's not doing anything here, but she asks stupid questions or whatever. I don't know what's going on, but he's, you know, doing everything he can to, make these outrageous claims about this clerk, and Trump going on Truth Social and saying the whole thing's corrupt, everything's rigged. You know how it is with him and court cases. Every court case against him is rigged, and the judge is in the pocket of the politicians, and so his accusation is this particular woman clerk, who is a woman. Well, she's not just a female person, and she's not just working for a judge who's in the pocket of the Democratic politicians and Biden, and they're trying to frame me, and it's all rigged. But it's all rigged also because, this clerk, she's Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. What? Do they even know one another? I don't know. I don't know if there's any basis to this whatsoever, but it's just the kind of thing that he likes to spit out. Chris Kise ordinarily would be nowhere within 500 yards of something like this, ordinarily, because supposedly he's a good lawyer. But now it has to be their practice, and he's going to sort of repeat this stuff. And the judge is going to blow his stack and either give them the basis for declaring a mistrial or appealing the verdict or what have you. And in addition to all that, the clerk thing makes the judge say, I think maybe you keep attacking her and saying she's stupid, et cetera, and she's a woman and she's dumb and she doesn't belong here and she's Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. That's misogyny. Misogyny, that's the sort of thing that woke mind virus people say. Our judge is woke. See, we need to have a mistrial. That doesn't work with anybody but MAGA, but, that's all it takes these days, is that it work with MAGA. All right, so this is the report from yesterday. As I said in the messenger, Adam Klasfeld is the reporter here. A Manhattan judge fired a shot across the bow at former President Donald Trump's lead attorney on Thursday afternoon, ordering him not to make any further comments about his principal law clerk. Do not refer to my staff again, Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Arthur Engoron told Trump's lawyer, Christopher Kise, at the tail end of testimony by the former president's son, Eric Trump. So, okay, it was his turn yesterday. She's a civil servant, the judge added later. That's not going to make any difference to somebody like Trump, but okay. In fact, it makes it worse in Trump's view. Engoron previously issued a gag order preventing Trump and the parties from making statements about his staff and fined the former president a total of $15,000, whoop-de-doo, for 2 previous violations. The initial gag order was sparked by Trump's social media post smearing the clerk, Allison Greenfield, with a false rumor involving a politician. I think I gave you a hint as to what that rumor was. On Thursday, and it's not even a rumor. It's just, I think, there's no basis. Now, it's not even a rumor that's circulating. It's just something he spat out for no reason in order to create controversy. On Thursday, the judge commented that he may expand the order to cover the lawyers. Sometimes I think there's a bit of misogyny in you, referring to my female principal law clerk, the judge suggested. Trump's other attorney, Alina Habba, sprang to her co-counsel's defense. I assure you that's not the issue, Habba said, referring to the accusation of misogyny. Well, it is the issue. You're trying to assure us that it's not the case, but unfortunately it is the issue. Both Kise and Habba continued to accuse the clerk of bias, claiming that she writes notes to the judge, weighted against the defense. Engoron pointed out that lawyers pass notes to each other at the defense table and said that he has the absolute right to consult with and protect his staff. When Habba was absent from the court on October 19th, Kise got into a verbal altercation with two other female lawyers present in court that day, Greenfield and the Attorney General's counsel, Colleen Faraday. The confrontation occurred during a private huddle among the lawyers and the judge, known as a sidebar. Most of the conversation was inaudible, but the Attorney General's lawyer snapped at Kise with a remark that reverberated across the courtroom. "Be more respectful," Faraday said. "No," Kise countered. Faraday shot back, "That was rude." Multiple news outlets later reported the backstory that Kise had made a dismissive comment in response to a question by Greenfield, questioned Faraday's intelligence, and then apologized. Kise defended himself from the judge's accusations. "I'm not a misogynist," he said, adding that he has a 17-year-old daughter, which will not excuse you from that accusation. "But I can't be a misogynist. I know women." Anyway, the Trump lawyer added that he needed to make a record of his bias concerns, alleging that he felt like he was facing two adversaries, or as I like to say, adversaries. Engoron had sanctioned Trump's attorneys, including Kise, before trial for making motions that he had repeatedly rejected and described as borderline frivolous. But that too, an old Trump legal tactic, right? You know, you say, we want to introduce this line of argument or this evidence. No, actually overruled. That's not relevant. It would be prejudicial, or it's whatever. It's somehow inadmissible as evidence. And this is not an argument you're going to be permitted to make. There's no legal basis for it. You haven't established a foundation for it, et cetera, et cetera. And they just say, well, we're just going to keep doing it anyway, and you're going to yell at us. But the absence of a jury in this, a bench trial, well, on the one hand, ordinarily you do stuff like this, like there's a jury and you're not allowed to introduce certain evidence or make certain arguments, but you just sort of hint at them anyway and try to slip them in. And then the judge has to say the jury will disregard that. And sometimes it's difficult for them to disregard it. And the lawyers know that, and they're just trying to make it so that, you know, that bias slips through into the jury's consideration anyway. But with no jury there, it's a little bit less important to do something like this. But if you're trying to antagonize the judge or play to public opinion rather than anything else, then I guess that could be your play too. We want to repeat these accusations or repeat this line of argument in the public record and convince people that that Trump's being wrongly tried and wrongly convicted here, and that the only reason that there's a conviction is the judge's bias, and that's going to be the basis of our appeal, even though we'll lose the appeal as well. Or if you're trying to enrage the judge into doing something stupid so that you do have the basis for an appeal or a mistrial, that appears to be the tactic that's going on here. So let me switch over now. Oh yeah, that's the end of the Messenger's report. But and head over to the Rolling Stone report. This from October 9th. And as we said, Team Trump trying to use fire festival strategies in the fraud case. No chance of winning on the merits, so they're trying to score PR points, kick up as much dirt as possible, enrage the judge, trash some of the witnesses, and turn the process into a media circus. How so? He reports it this way. They report it this way. In the weeks leading up to the start of the $250 million civil fraud trial in New York, Donald Trump and his attorneys privately discussed how they believed defeat in this trial was preordained. It's rigged against me, in addition to, I'm going to lose because I'm guilty. Anyway, their best chance, and it wasn't much, according to two sources familiar with the matter and another two people briefed on internal deliberations, would be to fight the case on appeal. This belief led to the development of an approach to the case that centers around chaos and cacophony, rather than any attempt to win on the merits. One person close to Trump describes it as fire festival strategies. That approach, let's just do it and be legends, in the words of the festival's founders, famously turned Fyre Fest into a scandal-riddled disaster, which may be what happens with this and other trials. But Trump and his lawyers are hoping that their legal strategy in their ongoing courtroom suicide mission, that's in quotes, will score some political and public relations points for Trump. Kick up as much dirt as possible, enrage the judge, gratuitously trash some of the witnesses, and turn the process into a media circus. The aggressive approach is likely to appeal to the former president's notable taste for the jugular, and as Greg would remind us, his taste for chaos as a chaos agent. But the client-pleasing strategy also risks undermining the longer-term legal work of defending the Trump business empire that propelled him to fame and the presidency as its future hangs in doubt. Judge Arthur Engoron has already fined Trump's attorneys $7,500 each for repeatedly bringing up legal arguments he had already barred. But in recent weeks, Trump has privately suggested that his lawyers should not, quote, worry for now about getting further sanctions by the court for their planned procedural antics, the sources tell Rolling Stone. I'll pause here for a minute and say, one, remember that there's every chance that Trump will never actually pay his attorneys. But in addition, he says things like, well, don't worry about getting fined by the court for being a aggressive advocate. I want that, and I'll cover your fines. Wink, wink. Well, he probably won't. And as a matter of fact, he too has been sanctioned. I don't know if it had happened, I guess, by the point when this article was written, but he has recently been fined, as we said we noted in the Messenger coverage, $15,000. Not a whole lot for somebody who's supposedly a billionaire. But, he doesn't like to let go of any money, but also he doesn't like to actually meet his obligations. So I'm sure that annoyed him. And I did see a couple of days ago the announcement on, came through on Blue Sky somewhere. This is a long time ago, so I don't know if I'll be able to find it or not. But there was the announcement that, okay, well, the $15,000 in fines that had been leveled against Trump himself had in fact been paid to the court, and that Alina Habba had offered the check up to the court in order to cover those fines. And, I had commented at the time, well, Alina Habba just lost $15,000, because I'm sure her plan was, I'll pay the fines for you on your behalf so that we're square with the court while this trial is still going on. And then, you'll pay me back when the time comes. Well, no, he won't. But there is this note. So, Alina Habba just lost $15,000. It was Joshua Friedman. Who is Joshua Friedman? Shall we look and see? He's a freelance writer and editor, formerly with The Atlantic and Boston Review, so I guess maybe covering the trial. So he announces that this is the case and prints a screenshot of Habba's letter to the court explaining what's going on here. So there's a fine point to be made by, somebody else stepped in and straightened it out, and I'm not certain that I have we'll find it for you, I hope. But somebody straightened me out on this, and I was like, okay, well, she lost all that money. And it is noted that the copy of the check, which is here, I gotta enlarge it, makes it plain that this comes from Habba's law firm, Habba, Madayo and Associates LLP trust account. And it's, it is indeed a check for $15,000 for the contempt fines. But they pointed out, look, the fact that it comes from the client trust account means that, although I got to tell you, the $15,000 is written in a weird way on this thing. But anyway, it's from the client trust account, and somebody else who, appeared to be a practicing attorney said, well, what that means is that what the client trust account is that's a segregated account maintained by the lawyers, but it's not permitted, usually by ethics rules and by law, to contain their personal funds. It has to be, funds deposited there can only be from the clients, and for purposes like this, for paying legal expenses or paying fines to the court or whatever. So it can't have been Habba's money if it came out of the client trust fund, and you're not allowed to use other clients' contributions to the trust fund to pay a third client's fines. even if you believe he'll pay you back later. What I'm saying is, I bet they did it anyway. I'll bet there's $0 in that client trust fund that came from Trump or his companies or anybody connected to Trump, and that there's money in there from other clients, and that Haba borrowed it to immediately cover those fines, expecting that Trump would make up that shortfall, and that, okay, on the accounting side, everything will be square, even though you're really not supposed to do. But, money is fungible. I'm sure they excuse these things all the time, so long as the money is promptly returned. But if it's not, it could create enormous problems and probably create a situation in which Alina Haba actually loses that $15,000. She has to make that up, that hole in the client trust fund from her own funds, and try and recover from Donald Trump later on. I don't know. It may be that she convinced him, to make some sort of deposit to the trust fund in anticipation of these things. I'm not really 100% sure. Nobody knows for sure. But Trump and paperwork, I just say keep an eye on it. Eventually we'll find out. It'll become a minor story, and we'll find out about that, and we'll all be able to point back and say, we guessed that way back when. All right. So back to the Rolling Stone description of their tactics as Fire Festival tactics. That was where we jumped out of here. Was in recent weeks, Trump has privately suggested that his lawyers should not worry for now about getting further sanctions by the court for their planned procedural antics, sources tell Rolling Stone. So this is essentially where Trump said, if somebody, get that guy out of here, out of my rally, if you punch him in the face, don't worry, I'll pay your legal bills, right? If you go into court and you cause this disruption and you execute my plan of trying to piss off the judge so badly that he does something that would cause a mistrial or give us a leg to stand on appeal, and you get fined along the way, don't worry, I'll cover it. P.S. No, I won't. Anyway, instructed to ignore such concerns, his attorneys have crafted a courtroom game plan that leans on heavy-handed tactics such as deeply personal, at times, in the phrasing of a Trump advisor, below-the-belt attacks on witnesses, prosecutors, and the judge, and also planned threats of retaliatory lawsuits against some of those same people. Trump and his lawyers, who include Chris Kise, Alina Haba, and Jesus Suarez for this trial, have also long settled on a roster of delay tactics that are almost guaranteed to antagonize Judge Engoron. This includes going to trial, which could last for months, with the intention of grilling witnesses with lengthy, meandering questions and repeating again and again arguments that the judge has already deemed frivolous, the sources say. A lot of this is just begging for sanctions, says one attorney who's known Trump for years. It is not how I'd do it, but maybe that's a reason I'm not on the legal team. In the weeks prior to the start of the trial, Trump had specifically discussed with some of his legal and political advisors how much he was looking forward to his attorneys making Michael Cohen cry on the stand, a person familiar with the situation says. Trump's former lawyer and fixer is now listed as witness for New York State Attorney General Letitia James's office, and the ex-president constantly has revenge on his mind. Trump hopes that this will be achieved by relentlessly attacking his ex-fixer's character, intelligence, professional acumen, federal criminal charges, and even personal life. The former president has encouraged his legal team to fight rough and fight dirty if you've got to. With Cohen and others during the trial, a person close to Trump says, paraphrasing the ex-president, although it is enclosed in quotes. This source has spoken repeatedly to Trump about this case and adds the former president gets especially animated or agitated when Cohen comes up. Cohen, however, insists he's not worried. I have provided 100 hours of testimony before members of Congress, law enforcement agencies, committees, whose on behalf of Donald, primary goal was to denigrate me. He's talking about January 6th, I guess. Discredit me and harass me. Maybe others as well. Impeachment, whatever. None of it has worked, and it won't work now when I take the stand in this case. The former Trump attorney tells Rolling Stone, I am certain Judge Engoron will not allow Donald's legal team to make a mockery of his court and allow these antics to occur. Well, I mean, there's nothing he can do about it. If they're willing to take the fines, they will occur. They have occurred. So I'm not certain that I'm certain he won't allow it, but not certain that it won't happen or that it wouldn't occur anyway. If the team sticks to their and their clients' plans, Engoron's interventions won't stop them from trying many times. Suarez, in particular, has already earned Engoron's ire with a lengthy questioning of Trump's former accountant, Donald Bender, as the Trump attorney tried to walk Bender through a lengthy series of repetitive questions concerning nearly a dozen years' worth of Trump's financial filings. Engoron blew up at what he called a ridiculous line of inquiry that would waste time. At one point, Suarez even asked Bender if he had, quote, any mental health reasons that he can't testify today, prompting an objection from the Attorney General's office. It is a bombastic, quintessentially Trumpian legal strategy that's less geared toward impressing a judge who Trump openly despises and more a PR blitz aimed at the Fox News set. One of the sources briefed on the plans characterizes. You say, well, is there any reason why you, Mr. Bender, would have any mental health reason that you can't testify today? No, of course not. It's not even ever been suggested. But now it's on the record that there are suspicions about his mental health, and Fox News and the New York Post and others will probably, or is it the Daily News that takes his side more often than I can't remember which one does which. But at any rate, the pro-Trump outlets will now run with, Fox question marks about, is there a mental health problem with his accountants? Is that why he's on trial? Isn't it really his problem and not Trump's? Still, among Trump's many attorneys, I may have missed a small paragraph here. It's a strategy that Engoron appears to be aware of. Who are you talking to? He asks. Me, the press, or the audience? He barked at Trump's lawyers on Tuesday, but this was again back in early October, this incident. Anyway, still, among Trump's many attorneys and different legal teams, this approach is not without its detractors. Trump's legal teams, including ones now tasked with handling the high-stakes civil and criminal cases against him, are routinely fraught with infighting, backstabbing, power grabs, and turnover. There are some Trump legal counselors who believe this strategy could easily backfire, result in too many expensive sanctions, and ultimately make an appeal harder, not easier. People with knowledge of the matter say. There are also some Trump attorneys who are convinced that if the current strategy fails to deliver for the ex-president, he will harshly blame and scream at his legal team, even though the mudslinging was his own preferred strategy in the first place. That wouldn't surprise anyone. There are scant signs of imminent shakeup for this particular Trump legal crew, but that doesn't mean the former president isn't keen on keeping his options open. In the past 2 weeks, Trump has discussed with some of his longtime associates the names of other defense attorneys he has considered asking to join the New York legal team. Two sources with knowledge of the matter say. I don't think he's had any success in that in the month since this was written. But some of the names that Trump recently floated were lawyers who didn't even have a background in the kind of laws at the center of this trial. It was him name-dropping TV attorneys again. Barry Mason, I'm out of ideas after that. Lance Ito. No, wait a minute. I don't know. He's probably just throwing out the names of people who have been on TV and said nice things about him, whether or not they have any expertise in this sort of law. Okay. The civil trial currently playing out in the New York courtroom represents the culmination, of course, of a years-long investigation by James into allegations of fraud against the Trump Organization, the heart of the 45th U.S. president's business empire. James initiated the investigation in 2019 and brought a suit against the former president's company in 2022, claiming that the organization had engaged in fraud by dramatically overvaluing its assets to the tune of many millions of dollars. In late September, Engoron ruled that Trump and his sons were liable for fraud alleged in the suit, revoking their business licenses and putting the financial stability of Trump's family business at risk. That helped prompt Trump, who has often preferred to skip legal proceedings, to make a rare and voluntary public appearance in court last week, again back in October. He has used the occasion to bask in the publicity surrounding the case and call for the presiding judge to be disbarred, in turn floating baseless conspiracy theories about the court clerk on social media and earning himself a gag order for the attack on court staff. Sources who have spoken to the former president say that Trump has repeatedly stressed that his visits to the courthouse were motivated by a desire to publicly defend his long-curated reputation as a talented businessman, his net worth, and claims about the value of his assets, all of which have come into question as a result of the case. The sources say that the former president is uniquely sensitive to allegations that he and his businesses inflated their value and has long attached a strong emotional weight to his status on the Forbes magazine list of richest Americans. In an apparent sign of how much the case has rattled Trump, here comes the music. A person with direct knowledge of the matter tells Rolling Stone that in the past month, the former president has repeatedly interjected comments entirely unprompted about his wealth in the middle of unrelated conversations. In the middle of these sudden outbursts, Trump complains that people are lying about his personal and corporate net worth and the value of his Florida club, Pervalago. The source adds, furthermore, Trump has signaled he wants to testify in the case, and that'll probably only sink him. Plus, of course, his kids are going to have to do the same.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got that one segment left now. Oh my God, and it's all been about, Trump and Mike Johnson, but what can you do? These are, these stories are shaping the landscape upon which everything else is happening. So I got one more thing here for you. Liz Dye writing in Aaron Rupar's public notice Substack. Is it a Substack? All right, it's not a Substack. All right, whatever. It's like a Substack, but not one. Maybe? Who knows? At any rate, a subscription newsletter, but non-paywalled. You know, they'll let you read. It's very nice. I enjoy that. But let's throw this into the mix. Trump's Truth Social page is a riot of witness intimidation. Even his lawyers can't really defend it, but I guess it's all part of the strategy. And so I thought we would add this into it. This is a current piece from today. And just to give you an idea of what's going on there, you know, you and I don't look at Truth Social. Occasionally, the screenshots leak through to other social media platforms. We know that he's up to this stuff, but might pay to take a look at just how crazy it's getting as part of this strategy to antagonize the entirety of the legal system so that he can continue to claim it's all biased against me. You're breaking every rule. That's why you're losing. I mean, you're also guilty, but then you're breaking all the rules and getting fined on top of being guilty. So, you know, I don't know, like at some point, maybe things tip the other direction and most of the country is just like, he's crazy and belongs in jail. I don't know. We'll help contribute to that as much as possible. On August 6th, Alabama man Arthur Ray Hansen II left a voicemail threatening Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis in Georgia, not Alabama, with violence if she charged Donald Trump with interference in the 2020 election. Well, too late. I would be very afraid if I were you because you can't be around people all the time that are going to protect you, he said on a recorded call like an idiot. When you charge Trump on that fourth indictment, anytime you're alone, be looking over your shoulder. What you put out there, bitch, he throws in there for the hell, comes back at you 10 times harder, and don't ever forget it. Well, that same day, Hansen left a similar message for Fulton County Sheriff Patrick Labat, Labat, L-A-B-A-T. If you think you're going to take a mugshot of my President Donald Trump and it's going to be okay, you're going to find out that after you take that mugshot, some bad beep is going to probably happen to you. Where's my, I need some of my, censorship. There we go. There's my horn. I got it. Anyway, you're going to find out some bad ass is probably going to happen to you. I'm warning you right now before you up your life and get hurt real bad. This is great for the sheriff. They love it, right? Whether you've got a ing badge or not ain't going to help you none. You going to get up. You keep ing with my president. Wow. Well, the threats didn't work, and on August 24th, Trump surrendered at the Fulton County Jail. Trump went on to raise $7.1 million off his mugshot, but Hansen fared much worse. Everything Trump touches dies, and anything you let touch you will kill you too. This week, he was indicted for using interstate communications to threaten or to kidnap or injure a person. The day before Hansen's calls to officials in Georgia, a Texas woman named Abigail Jo Schrei left a voicemail for a federal judge. You may know her, Tanya Chutkan, who is now presiding over Trump's election interference case in D.C. This one, of course, much worse. Hey, you stupid slave N-word. You are in our sights. We want to kill you, she said. If Trump doesn't get elected in 2024, it's all on you. We are coming to kill you. So tread lightly, bitch. You will be targeted personally, publicly, your family, all of it. It's like they're trying to fulfill every element of the criminal code against this by hitting everything. Okay, Schrei was indicted in September, and like Hansen, was charged with making threats via interstate communication. But while Hansen and Schrei were exceptionally careless about covering their tracks, they certainly weren't alone in menacing the targets of Trump's ire. Judges and prosecutors in every one of Trump's cases have been subjected to threats and harassment for simply doing their jobs. Next section, Trump's lawyers flail, not fail, but also fail, but flail to defend the indefensible. And yet, on September 25th, Trump's lawyer, John Lauro, argued against the special counsel's motion for a gag order in the D.C. case, calling it bare speculation. Bare, not base? That third parties might interact with the individuals President Trump comments on. Of course, it was fairly well proven that that was going to be the case. It had already happened. This was news to Judge Chutkan, who had been protected by extra security for months, thanks to Schrei and the goons who read Trump's social media feed. On October 17th, she imposed a limited order restricting Lauro's client from targeting witnesses, courthouse staff, but not the judge herself, and prosecutors in the D.C. case. Trump immediately appealed to the D.C. Circuit and requested that Judge Chutkan stay her ruling until the appellate court could weigh in on the breathtakingly overbroad order based on the supposed threats and harassment occasioned by Trump's vitriol. The court granted an administrative stay for the parties to brief the matter, very kind of them, which Trump celebrated by firing off a volley of social media posts attacking his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who was at that moment testifying in the New York civil fraud case, just in case Judge Chutkan harbored any doubt as to how Trump will conduct himself toward witnesses in her own courtroom if given free rein. And there's a screenshot of his Truth Social screaming about it. And I mean, do you want to know the sorts of things that he actually sends out? Sleazebag attorney Michael Cohen, the New York State's primary witness, admitted today that President Trump never told him to increase asset values. He also got caught lying on numerous occasions. He was totally discredited, like a Perry Mason moment. See, I told you he would invoke Perry Mason. The AG witch hunt should be dropped immediately. Fox News coverage was so inaccurate. Sad. So, all right, that's the example that they bring up. I don't see any calls for violence there necessarily, but, that's what he's counting on. I didn't call for violence. It's just, but he knows very well that people will see this and wink, wink. I'm supposed to be the one calling for violence, not him. That way he won't get in trouble. I'll take it for him. Trump was already under an existing gag order in New York after he posted a picture of Justice Arthur Engoron's law clerk on Truth Social and falsely and baselessly claimed she was Senator Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. Okay, sure, why not? He's now violated that New York order twice. On October 20th, Judge, right? Engoron fined him $5,000 for failing to take the offending post off his personal website after deleting it from Truth Social. I thought that was a very interesting tactic as well. He posts it on Truth Social. You better delete that. Fine, I'll delete it. And he deletes it from Truth Social, but he takes a screenshot of it and puts it on his website. You didn't tell me I had to delete it from every place on the web. I'm not responsible for every place on the web. Well, it's your website. All right. Well, I guess you have me there. Fine. I'll take care of it. Anyway, 5 days later, the former president walked out of the courtroom and complained to reporters about a person who was very partisan sitting alongside of the judge. Perhaps even much more partisan than he is. Judge Engoron put Trump on the stand where he testified that he'd been referring to his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who was 15 feet away and separated by a barrier, noting that the law clerk is the only person who was actually sitting next to him with no barrier. Justice Engoron, they keep saying that. Do they call them justices because they're on the Superior Court or the Supreme Court in New York, which is not actually the Supreme Court? Maybe they're confused about that. I think he's just judge. But in New York, I think I've mentioned this before, for whatever reason, the trial courts are called the Supreme Court there, and that the highest court in New York is the Court of Appeals. They don't have a Supreme Court in the same sense. Or they don't call, or the court that they do call the Supreme Court is not what we think of as the Supreme Court. And that doesn't mean there are justices there, although who knows, maybe New York does call them justices. But it's interesting, if confusing. I don't know. I've never practiced in New York, certainly, but I do remember learning about that and having that mentioned as a point of confusion in law school. Well, this isn't the Supreme Court. It's, they had their reasons why they decided that's it. It's interesting that they thought of things that way. Well, the Supreme Court ought to be the trial courts where they, that's where supreme justice is taken care of. The other stuff is just appeals, just legal points. The real trial where we try all the evidence and examine all the facts. Well, that should be the supreme, it's philosophical. But anyway, never mind all of that. Right. So now, I didn't want to go to enlargement of that Truth Social thing. Here we are. So he's violated the New York order twice, fined $5,000. 5 days later, he walks out and says, I attacks the person sitting next to this judge, and then gets put on the stand, and the judge says, who were you talking about? Because I told you you're under a gag order not to talk about my staff, right? I was talking about Michael Cohen when he was up there in the witness stand. He was next to you. Well, not really. I don't believe you. And of course, the judge is pointing out, I'm the finder of fact in this trial. There's no jury here. So, all right. What do I think is true about what you said? Answer, nothing. I don't believe you. You're getting another fine. That's what he says. He says, look, Engoron ruled that the witness is not credible. That's Trump, and fined him another $10,000. I'm very protective of my staff, as I believe I should be, he went on. I don't want anybody killed. But before Trump's lawyers could draft their appeal of the New York sanctions, Trump fired off a maniac attack. I'm sorry, it says manic attack, but it also was a maniac attack on Mark Meadows after ABC News reported that he'd testified to the grand jury in D.C. under a grant of immunity. I don't think Mark Meadows would lie. Oh, this is Trump. I don't think Mark Meadows would lie about the rigged and stolen, which he misspells, 2020 presidential election merely for getting immunity against persecution by deranged prosecutor Jack Smith, he rambled in a long post, which ended by describing cooperating witnesses as weaklings and cowards and so bad for the future of our failing nation. Okay. Well, it is long and rambling. I'm not going to read it, but you get the idea. Trump's lawyers cannot have been pleased that their client seized on the administrative stay to demonstrate that without guardrails, he'd behave as badly in D.C. as he has in New York. But they swallowed hard and gamely explained to the court that it actually was the government's fault that their client had been forced to intimidate a witness on social media. Recent leaks regarding Meadows' alleged testimony, which received wide media attention, demonstrate why the gag order is unworkable, they huffed. If the gag order had been in effect, President Trump would have been unable to respond to or rebut the false claims about his interaction with his former chief of staff, an issue that is important to many Americans in connection with the 2024 election. It should be noted that they buried this argument in a footnote, perhaps hoping that Judge Chutkan wouldn't notice their brazen defense of a statement clearly designed to discourage a witness from testifying against him. They may also have hoped she wouldn't notice them tacitly agreeing that Trump had been perfectly able to figure out what he was allowed to say before and after the gag order was stayed. She noticed. The statement singles out a foreseeable witness for purposes of characterizing his potentially unfavorable testimony as a lie and could readily be interpreted as an attempt to influence or prevent the witness's participation in this case, she wrote, as she reimposed the gag, adding that Lauro's argument proves that far from being arbitrary or standardless, the order's prohibition on targeting statements can be straightforwardly understood and applied. On Thursday night, Trump's lawyers filed an emergency motion asking the D.C. Circuit to do what Judge Chutkan would not. They demand a stay of the trial court's gag order, permitting Trump to continue his wave of witness intimidation while the appellate court considers the matter. Moreover, Chutkan took issue with Lauro's protest that the court cited no evidence supporting its findings of risks of harassment and witness intimidation. The evidence is on the record. Defendant simply fails to acknowledge it, she said, referencing the government's brief, which quotes officials in Georgia and Arizona testifying to Congress about the waves of harassment they suffered every time Trump hate posted about them because they refused to steal President Biden's electoral votes. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. Someone's going to get killed, warned Georgia election official, remember this? Gabriel Sterling, in a press conference on December 1st, 2020. It's been 3 years already, noting that a 20-something tech in Gwinnett County today, back then, has death threats and a noose put out saying he should be hung for treason because he was transferring a report on batches from an EMS to a county computer so he could read it. Prosecutors highlighted Atlanta poll workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who testified that they had to flee their homes after Trump and his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, falsely accused them of counting thousands of fraudulent ballots on election night. Several people who harassed the women are charged in the Fulton County RICO indictment, but that doesn't undo the harm. 3 years later, Freeman and Moss still fear for their safety. And just in case anyone managed to miss it, Trump's public statements convinced his followers to descend on the nation's capital, screaming, "Hang Mike Pence," as they demanded to overthrow the government. In short, it's very clear that Trump's words have devastating real-world consequences for his targets. We all know this. There's always a chance that Trump could eke out a partial victory on appeal, with the D.C. Circuit scaling back the scope of the gag order insofar as it bans criticism of the prosecutors. But this ruling is not going to be reversed because the appellate court disagrees that Trump's outbursts pose substantial risk of intimidating witnesses and prejudicing the case. As if to reinforce the point, before the order even appeared online Sunday night, Trump had several toes over the line trying to violate it with a Truth Social post in which he blasted former Attorney General Bill Barr as a loser and dumb and weak, slow-moving, lethargic, gutless, and lazy rhino who couldn't do the job. Barr will be witness in the D.C. trial, and Trump's post is arguably an attack on his credibility in violation of the court's order. Trump's lawyers argue there's no risk of Barr being intimidated. He's a big boy with enough money to take care of himself. But that's not the case for less powerful witnesses, as well as the line attorneys and courtroom personnel who find themselves under attack by the MAGA mob. The bottom line is that Trump's invective on social media has real-world consequences, and courts are right to impose limits on his speech to protect the integrity of his trials and the safety of witnesses and civil servants. So, the conclusion was obvious. Anyway, just thought I would share all of that and make for a theme of this Friday show. I have some other things I got to catch up on, including doubling back on something we said yesterday and offering a correction. Can I find the note? Yes, it appeared on Twitter which is why I was kind of slow to recognize it at the time. I'm keeping less of an eye on that, but thanks to let's see, the Twitter handle is war. Do I have this right? Sometimes it's hard to read words that run together. Like, am I separating these correctly? Is it War Eagle Biol? B-I-O-L? That's how it's spelled out anyway. War Eagle, right? Or could be, I'm like, Where Eagle? No. War Eagle Biol, I'm not sure. Anyway, Dr. Mary Mendonca, I guess, is the name associated with it. But so, hi Mary, how you doing? Good call here. She points out, as we were talking yesterday, what was the context? I can't remember. But remember when Dan Quayle and the potato thing came up? And I've remembered it backwards. I think she's right about this. I said, oh, well, but wasn't it the case that he didn't actually misspell potato, but that somebody prompted him? No, isn't there an E on the end? And he was like, I don't know, flustered and put it on there. Oh, yeah, you're right. So there was a basis for my misunderstanding. It was his claim that was sort of kind of the case, but the video of the incident proves that it was running in the other direction. So Mary, Dr. Mendonca here says, I remember the Quayle story being the opposite. And she's right. The kid spelled it. It was a spelling bee, and they so the game was that Dan Quayle, visiting the classroom, would call students up and give them a spelling word, and they would write it on the board, and everybody would say, great, you got it right. The kids spelled it correctly on the board, potato, just ending in O. And Quayle told him there was an E on the end, and the kid reluctantly, now I remember, he put the E on there because the Vice President of the United States has put the E on there, and he was too embarrassed to leave it. He erased it himself right after writing it. I followed your instruction, but then I erased it because I know it's not right. And that's why it was such a big deal that he was insisting that there was an E. Now, Quayle's explanation was that he had a card in his hand, prompting him, these are the words we want you to spell. And that on the card, potato was misspelled. And so Quayle was relying on the card to prompt the kid, but he could have said, this is a misspelling. If he was a smart person, he'd be like, no, this is misspelled. I guess it's possible that maybe the word on the card was potatoes, and he accidentally said potato, and then, I don't know, from there screwed it up. But at any rate, yes, I don't know. I forget what point we were trying to make with that yesterday, but it must obviously not have gone well because, as it happens, the example was entirely backwards. So forget that. The point was probably a good one. I just needed a different example to point to, but maybe it was also a bad one. I don't know. Anyway, I think Dr. Mendonca is right about that one. I just want to sneak that in before we exit for the day. Oh, that reminds me. Dang. Maybe I can save this one for later because we are running a bit. We're running out of time here, and Rosalind McGregor has sent me another Michigan update, and I'm looking at it, and I don't think it doesn't have to break, today necessarily, but Friday is always a good day for it because we have so much time. But I've eaten it up with all these other things. So, all right, if you don't mind, Rosalind, we'll hang on to this one for next week. But it's an intriguing story. Definitely. And thank you for sending it to me. And, gosh, we'll just have to hold on until next week for this one. And we'll see what else can we sneak in. There's a couple of things. I mentioned to you, we talked at length about Tommy Tuberville and the, revolt among Republicans in the Senate about this. And so there's a few things maybe we can sneak in before, we wrap up for the day. So many things I wanted to get to. But, all right. Well, in addition to just having that fight with Tuberville, they've had some substantive successes about this. I'll read you quickly this piece from Politico. Senate confirms top Navy and Air Force picks as Tuberville feud intensifies. The move comes as several GOP members confront the Alabama senator over his blanket hold on nominees. Connor O'Brien reported this one. I think we can run through it pretty quick. The Senate easily confirmed Joe Biden's picks to be top officers in the Navy and Air Force on Thursday as frustration with Tuberville's blockade mounts. The votes were 95-1 to approve both Admiral Lisa Franchetti as Chief of Naval Operations, first woman to head the Navy, I believe, and General David Alvin as Air Force Chief of Staff, Republican Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas, the lone senator to oppose both confirmations. Tuberville didn't even do it, I guess. Franchetti's confirmation makes her the first female member of the Joint Chiefs entirely. How do you like that? In a third vote, senators approved Lieutenant General Christopher Mahoney to be the second ranking officer in the Marine Corps, 86-0, relieving General Smith of having to do both jobs there. Franchetti and Alvin's approval gives the Joint Chief a full slate of Senate-confirmed officers for the first time since July. Both nominees are their respective services' number 2 officers currently and have been filling in the top jobs on an acting basis. Acting. Yes, exactly. Joint Chiefs have been hobbled by Tuberville's blanket hold on senior promotions, while the Alabama Republican, which he's imposed in protest of the Pentagon's abortion travel policy. Chuck Schumer has lined up votes on 3 officers, these 3 after Tuberville, and Senator Dan Sullivan forced Schumer's hand by circulating cloture petitions themselves on the nominees. Oh, interesting. So, but Tuberville, I guess, circulating his own cloture policy or petition, or did he join with Sullivan in it? That's an interesting development that I hadn't heard about in the development of this fight. But the 9-month fight over military nominees has reached a fever pitch, and even Tuberville's fellow Republicans are signaling they are growing impatient with his tactics. We know about that. So they have this workaround in place. I think we gave some description earlier this week, I think, about the use of the idea of a standing order about this. And let me give you some weedy junk about the standing order. First of all, news from none other than Andrew Desiderio, who made a quote appearance on the show yesterday, who now tweets that the Senate parliamentarian has ruled on this thing and has told the authors of this resolution, quoted underneath, that the threshold for passage will be 60 and not 67. It's not a change to the standing rules. It's a standing order. And so you'll just need to get past that one filibuster in order to set this up. But I guess there was some question about whether or not the threshold would be 67, making it a rules change. But it isn't. It's just 60. We were initially told by committee staff that the committee would decide the threshold, that the committee would make that determination, the rules committee. But apparently, I don't know whether they turned for advice to the parliamentarian or not, or maybe they figured it was better legitimized by having a ruling from the parliamentarian. Anyway, as the tweet below, which he quotes himself, says, this is a standing order resolution. And here is the Reed Cinema standing order resolution that would temporarily allow for most military promotions to be considered en bloc. As we scooped, he says, last week, exceptions will be for the Joint Chief promotions and combatant commanders. And that's why they moved those individually this week. Now that the Joint Chiefs are taken care of, they can move to this. Want to know how it reads? I don't even know if we'll have time to get through it. It's short, but it's wordy. Mr. Reed submitted the following resolution, which was referred to the Committee on Rules and Administration. Resolved, en bloc consideration of military nominations. And there's a definition in this section. The term military nomination means a nomination to a position in or promotion of an individual serving in a position in an armed force. Then there will be a motion to proceed. In general, the authorization, except as provided in subparagraph B during the 118th Congress, see, it's time limited, it shall be in order for the majority leader or a designee to make a single motion in executive session or a single motion in legislative session to proceed to executive session to the en bloc consideration of 2 or more military nominations that at the time of the motion are pending on the executive calendar or are on the secretary's desk, have laid over 1 day as required under paragraph 1 of Rule 31 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, and have been favorably reported to the Senate by the Committee on Armed Services of the Senate. There's an exception. It shall not be in order to include in the motion under subparagraph A a nomination to a position described in Section 151A of Title 10, the United States Code relating to the membership of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or a position of the commander of the combatant command enlisted under Section 161, 167, or 167B of Title 10. You see how wordy it's going to get? Those are the exceptions that were previously mentioned. So, we won't be able to get through all of this, but what do we learn from this? What's the gobbledygook all mean? Well, like we said, it reduces it to one filibuster. Instead of having individual filibusters on all of them, going to an en bloc consideration of everything pending except the Joint Chiefs nominations helps them clear out this calendar, right? Now, ordinarily, if you, it borrows a move from judicial nominations, right? When you're in regular legislative session, that's not where you deal, that's where we deal with bills and resolutions, not with nominations. They move to executive session to consider executive appointments to the various branches, whether it be military or judges or whatever. That's how it works. But the motion to go to executive session is subject to debate and subject, therefore, to a filibuster. And then once you get to executive session, the motion to take up a nomination and then to consider the nomination and then to finalize the nomination, all also subject to filibuster at different points. But somewhere along the line, I think Robert Byrd invented this move of saying, well, if the motion to go to executive session for the purpose of considering a specified or some set of specified nominations, that shall be non-debatable. And then once you get into executive session, when it comes to the end of debate on the nomination, there can be one and one filibuster only. And so they're going to mimic that procedure by, I guess, limiting it to the one filibuster of the motion to move to the nominations or to proceed to executive session to consider those nominations. One shot at it. And that the motion will require 60 votes to invoke cloture, not 67, because this is just a standing order good only for the 118th Congress, not the standing and supposedly continuing Senate rules. Get it? That's some weedy junk. Last minute weeds for you here on the show, it being Friday.
You have been listening to
Blew up your brains at the last possible moment. Now to blow up your brains, or perhaps to help you recover, Justice Putnam takes up the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy right here on Netroots Radio following this program. Let's see, Speaker MAGA Mike Johnson is just a dapper insurrectionist, as it turns out. Those horn-rimmed glasses disguising it beautifully, although making him look like the Simpsons lawyer. Stay tuned.